Well, I'm glad you guys are here for our second in the series. We've got Jonathan Wanner with us. Last week I started and I realized that not everybody knew Peter and I didn't really prepare. So this time I asked Jonathan to tell me who he was so that I can tell you what he said. Jonathan, his biggest claim to fame, as far as I'm concerned, is that he is the voice of the cantors of the chanting behind us on Sunday mornings. He's a baritone and a countertenor, and he sings in our choir, obviously. When he's not singing, he is earning his doctorate in Renaissance literature. Renaissance liturgy would be good too. At Catholic U, and he studies Shakespeare and the metaphysical poets, and especially their ties to the Renaissance prayer manuals, Catholic doctrines, and mysticism. So he also teaches freshman writing at Catholic U, and he teaches tutors homeschool children in Latin and Gregorian chant. And I hope that he will be doing that when we move into our new building, that we can start such a program ourselves. So Jonathan, with no further ado, thank you for coming tonight and for sharing your knowledge with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. In 1967, a group of French Benedictine monks abandoned their centuries-old habit of chanting the Psalms. These Benedictines had been used to sleeping only a couple hours a night and chanting about 6 to 7 hours a day. But when they abandoned their chanting, they quickly became fatigued, ill, depressed. One doctor blamed it on their vegetarian diet. But the addition of meat did not restore their vitality. A French physician and ear specialist, Dr. Alfred Tomatis, then advised them to return to their chanting. And soon, they were restored. Good evening, my name is Jonathan Wanner. As Father mentioned, many of you know me as the Sunday morning voice chanting behind your shoulders. And tonight, I'm here to tell you why chant should be as daily a habit as flushing the toilet, and how it's more beneficial to you than a gluten-free diet. I'm also going to give you a few dirt under your fingernail tips on how to harvest those free-range benefits from chant. But before we do that, I want to consider what makes chant chant. How is chant different from other music? This question can be answered in many ways, but here are my 4 main ways that chant is. Number 1, chant is monophonic. It is just a melody. It doesn't have an accompaniment. It doesn't have special chords surrounding it. It's like singing a hymn without an organ, or how children sing on the playground. Once in a while you might hear a drone underneath. We do that frequently here at St. Luke's when a single singer sustains a single note underneath the chant, but most of the time it's just a simple melody. Number 2, chant has fewer pitches than normal music or other music. Music today is usually based on 12 notes. You have the 7 basic notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and there are 5 sharps and flats. So most modern songs feel free to use all the notes on the piano, the white keys and all the black keys. Chant, however, is based on a 7-note scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And once in a while you'll see one flat called te, which is just a little below ti. So imagine playing the piano and only pressing the white keys, and once in a while pressing one of the black keys, the B flat key. That's like chant. So as far as pitch goes, chant is simpler than Bach, Mozart, Chopin. And this makes sense because God is, of course, the most simple of all beings, so chant naturally imitates him in this respect. Number 3, chant looks different than modern music on the page. Today, composers write with circular notes and a staff of 5 lines. We can see this is true by looking at that rustic old favorite, Mary Had a Little Lamb. See, there are 5 lines on the staff. Each line represents a different pitch, and we have circular notes. Wondrous. Chant, on the other hand, has 4 lines on its staff. This is because chant usually only has an 8-note range. It will have more depending on the chant. Here at St. Luke's we do more elaborate chants which have an extensive range, but most of the time the amount of pitches you have is pretty limited in chant, which is why you don't need that 5th line. The notes are also square, you might notice. They're special notes called neumes, and they're square because they didn't have ballpoint pens in the Middle Ages. Instead they had quills, and these quills had chiseled edges. Number 4, chant has a fluid sense of rhythm. Modern music has a fixed measure of time. Songs have beats that are often repeated in groups, usually in groups of 3 or 4. For example, a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or swing music. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Chant, on the other hand, is not quite like that. It's an ever-changing time chameleon. Its rhythm is intuitive, free-flowing, like a fountain of liquid chocolate. Here's an example from the introit of the Requiem Mass. Requiem aeterna dona eis requiem. Chant invites us to put our calculators and our rulers back in our pockets. It defies normal measure of beats. Because, like all eternal things, it defies measurement. So, those are a few reasons why chant doesn't sound like Taylor Swift or Katy Perry. And that's how it should be, right? Because when we're in church, we shouldn't feel like we're loitering at a high school dance. Because chant is simple, it's sobering. Because it's fluid, it's inebriating. It elevates us because it grounds us. Chant is a crossroads where time and place and eternity somehow meet. All right, Mr. Wanner, so chant is different from other kinds of music, but who cares? You know, peaches and plums are different, but nobody cares about that. Well, here's why you should care. Chant, more than other kinds of music, makes your ear fertile. Chant makes your ear fertile. Part of being human is trying to be spiritually pregnant all the time. We need to constantly give births to new ways of knowing God, new ways of recognizing His beauty. And we need to be constantly trying to pop out new desires for God. Chant is the midwife that helps us to do just that. First, it helps us with knowledge. Words are the most precise way we can know anything. Jesus didn't paint a picture or play a violin for us because he knew that even though those things would make us feel good, we would have a lot of questions about them. So he gave us words to about. And the apostles and prophets gave us the Bible so that we would have even more words to about. chant transforms these words into a playground. So we want to play a game of tag with questions about God. So it helps us with knowledge. Second, chant helps us with memory. Want to hear a magic trick? Every adult in this room can say the alphabet correctly and recognize different animal noises with 100% accuracy. A big part of that is because when we all were little, we learned the ABC song, and we sang Old MacDonald Had a Farm. You don't need to be a magician to know that songs cement information in our brain. As St. Augustine said, memory is the art of salvation. Memory is the art of salvation. You can't love God if you don't remember Him. And the more you remember Him, the more you can love Him. Chant is a box where we can store the idea of God and put it in a place where we can remember it. That's the real reason why Nooms look square. Third, chant helps us with our will. Of course, after we remember God, we need to keep His dozen minus two commandments. What do you do when the devil makes your head throb? What I suggest is keeping the Tylenol back in the cabinet and trying your local chiropractor, plain chant. Chant realigns the spine of your anger, sorrow, and anxiety. It'll even crack the temptations out of your neck. Just try it. The next time you feel temptations of any sort, I guarantee you'll feel better if you pop in those earbuds and listen what's coming out of the throats of the monks of Norcia. I think a lot of people feel surprised when they don't usually think of music as a way of overcoming temptations. But, speaking from my own experience, often when I'm tempted, I think of some of the most beautiful passages of what I've sung. Not necessarily chant. Sometimes I think of Charles Wood's motet Expectans Expectavit, but it really does work. So chant leavens our soul so that we can know, remember, and choose God. But chant isn't just about the soul. It's also about the body. Remember those Benedictine monks who got tired and sick when they stopped chanting? Well, according to Dr. Tomatis, the man who studied them, the sound frequencies of chant help to recharge the brain, to re-energize it for daily life. In particular, the cortical charge we get from chant can help to drive our motivation, creativity, intuition, so that we can study better, work better, have better relationships. Dr. Tomatis goes on to explain one reason why chant is so therapeutic is because when we sing, our bones conduct the vibrations of the sounds at around 2000 hertzes. A chanter then doesn't just sing with their mouth, they sing with their bones, including their skull, which amplifies the sound when it vibrates. According to Tomatis, this bone conduction stimulates the muscles behind our eardrum. He believes this is the key to recharging the brain. Tomatis himself slept less than 4 hours a night, and he attributes this to the frequent practice of listening to music high in these special vibrations. In other words, chant is like a sonic massage. In 2015, the American Heart Association found that patients with coronary heart disease who practice meditation and chanting had nearly 50% lower rates of heart attack, stroke, and death. In the same year, a study at Georgetown found that chanting lowers one's blood pressure after only 3 months of regular practice. Other studies also show that chant can help with the digestion because it helps to make you more relaxed. And in 1991, a study proved that alcoholics who chanted every morning and evening for 6 weeks had a significant decrease in delta and alpha brain waves, which create feelings of tranquility. So the next time you feel that your brain is cloudy, or you're maybe angry, or you just feel like you maybe really want a nap, try chanting instead of complaining, or napping. Or take a nap and then chant. All that's good too. Alright, so let's say you're sold on chant. Sonic massage, yeah! Get me into that, right? But how should you listen to chant so that you can get these benefits? How can you sing it so that you can reap these benefits? Well, here are a few practical listening tips that will help you to get the most out of what's coming from the loft on Sunday mornings. Okay, 3 tips. Number 1, click your ears on. Hear that? Now you are, because your ears are on. At most given moments, there are at least half a dozen or more sounds that we don't notice. The whirring of heating and cooling, the gyrating of car wheels, the patter of feet, of hands shuffling, lecturers lecturing, birds birding. These are all secret sounds that we block out from our attention. Chant has secret sounds too, secret vibrations. But you've got to put on your rabbit ears first before you can hear them. So, your ears on. Tip number 2. Treat the words that are chanted like a puzzle. Most chants are either scripture or poetry about Jesus and Mary. They are deep in meaning, like digging to the center of the earth deep. But to find this meaning, we have to do the Sherlock Holmes thing and be on the lookout for clues. So ask yourself questions about the meanings of the words. If one of the words conjures up an image, be sure to imagine it in your mind. Take, for instance, the opening line of Lenten prose. We started singing this at the beginning of Lent, and you'll hear it again on Sunday. Drop down, ye heavens from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. What kind of clouds are those? I bet they're the kind of clouds that don't even get black when they rain. I would love to get me a glass of that rainwater because I could use a little bit of heaven and righteousness right now, right? That's funny. Clouds raining down heaven and righteousness. Not an image we usually see. The Bible takes the familiar and it makes it unfamiliar. Chant helps the Bible to take the familiar and make it unfamiliar. So turn the words into a puzzle. Tip number 3. Ask how the notes are a commentary on the words. The pitches and rhythms of chant are constantly lecturing at us. They constantly are giving us clues about which words are important, and sometimes the notes artistically mimic the meaning of the words. So to show you what this looked like, I drew a little chart of this, the opening line of the Lenten prose. So drop down ye heavens from above and let the skies pour down righteousness. So chanted, it sounds like this. Drop down ye heavens from above and let the skies pour forth righteousness. So this chart, it just shows where the pitches are in the song. something you can notice is on this chart, the pitches have different mountains and valleys, right? The highest pitches in the song are the tops of the mountains. So we have the word heavens on the first one, that's the highest one. We have the word let on the second one, and then righteousness on the third one. So just using pitch, this song suggests to us that these words are important, and we should especially pay attention to them. Something that we can also notice about this song is that there's a general downward trend in pitch after the word heavens. That makes sense, because the song is about heaven dropping down from the clouds to us. And certainly the song does that by the end, right? Here's earth, there's heaven, right? It's dropping down to us in the manna of the Eucharist, right? So this is a great example of how chant can artistically mimic, the pitches at least, can artistically mimic the meaning of the words. So if you follow these listening tips, you might just find yourself pregnant with new thoughts and new desires for God. Now, if you want more benefits from chant, it's better to sing it yourself. And while I don't have enough time to give you a tutorial, right now on how to do that, I do have a handout with some chant resources that might help you learn. So on the front of it, you have my 10 commandments on how to read chant. Those will be easy to follow if you can already read modern notation. On the back, I have different chant resources. They're free websites which do a great job of explaining to you how to read chant notes. And I also have some great books that I've consulted and used to teach chant. On the bottom of the back, I added Grace Before Meals. Thank you, Elena, for adding the English. One easy way of including chant in your life is finding daily moments where you can have chant. So what are those daily moments when you usually say a little prayer? Well, the mealtime prayer is one of those. I know a lot of people do car and travel prayers. Those moments, those little moments, or right at the end of a night prayer maybe, you can add a little chant, right? So try starting in a small way, then go from there. If you really get into it, try chanting lauds, or vespers, or compline, or try learning a few more chants. Or you could even try joining a schola. Of course, there are even more occasions when you can turn on a chant CD. When you're cleaning, when you're changing your baby's diapers, when you're driving to the grocery store, when you're gardening. All these moments can be elevated by simply listening to chant. No moment too ordinary for chant. So consider these little square notes pieces of dark chocolate for your ears to chew on. Or, if you'd rather, consider chant your grandma, who just wants to feed you a good square meal. And if you believe you're starting to appreciate chant late in life, just remember that late is really never too late for chant. Most people don't get introduced to chant when they're children. I myself heard chant only a couple times, maybe during high school. It wasn't until I got to college that I started singing it, and since then incorporating it into my life. But even if you're elderly or even if you're middle-aged, it doesn't matter. You can start a daily habit of chant. All right. So rather than ending with me talking, I thought it would be more appropriate to pray my conclusion by singing to you the gradual from the Requiem Mass. So if I had my way, I would chant this whole lecture to you, but that's not the easy way to do it.
You should all know one chant, very naturally, and that's the Aspergisme, which I hope you sing on Sunday mornings with us.
I chant the Our Father too, Our Father, and that a lot of the responses are, and the Gloria, it's more, it's an atypical chant, but we usually use the Shaw Gloria, which is chanted. And a lot of those chants that we sing in church too, they even try to make it easier by giving us circular notes instead of square notes so that people don't freak out. So if you're intimidated by square notes, you can even find circular notes with 5 lines on the staff. All right, so this is, I'm singing the gradual, is the one halfway down the page. So something very small, just a note about it. The word perpetual, if you notice, is really drawn out long with that long series of notes. It's perpetuated by that strand of notes. And so are some other words like righteous and remembrance. So the text is inviting us to see a connection between perpetualness and righteousness and remembrance. There's something eternal about the memory and the righteous man who continues perpetually to do the goodness of God. Of course, that recalls Psalm 1. And I noticed I misplaced my phone. Rest eternal, shall be hiding everlasting remembrance. He will not be our prey. Thank you for coming tonight, and I hope you find those chant resources to be helpful. Let me know if you have any questions about chant, or any other ideas of how you can incorporate it in your daily life. So thank you. That's all I have for now.
I have a question. Obviously, probably that's definitely more experienced with Western chant, but I'm just wondering how you think chants in the West, whether it be like Anglican chant or Gregorian chant, compare to Eastern chants or just chants from different cultures. And do they all have these same 4 basic attributes, or is there something distinct about Buddhist chant, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say they share a lot of the similar characteristics. They do have slightly different maybe scales that they're working with, slightly different notes and different traditions. But you see, in Eastern chant, for example, it's more common to see drones But you do see that a lot in the West. You just don't see people doing that as much now, but historically it was a lot more prominent. For example, yeah, they actually have very similar kinds of histories, even chant in the East, because before they have, chant notation, the West and the East, they wrote out these chants in squiggles. It's called semiology. And Eastern scribbles, they almost look like Arabic or Sanskrit, whereas Western scribbles look more Western, but they're still scribble-like. But yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to do a little more research to tell you more particulars, but right, there are slight pitch differences and tendencies. So I would say they probably have different modes. Those are just the different scales that they're based on. But I would say the chief characteristics are similar. The West also really emphasizes psalm tones. So when you have a lot of notes in succession, so you can get through the lyrics, like, for example, this Grace Before Meal is at a psalm tone. Bless us, O Lord, and give thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen. So there's a great monastic tradition in the West of that. They do that, something similar in the East, but I would say the West, in my experience at least, emphasizes, or at least has a different kind of psalm tone. Yeah.
I had a similar question, but more specific. I don't know if this might help. What are the differences specifically between like Roman and Gregorian chant and Anglican chant?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the Roman and Gregorian. I've talked to people who study the Roman chant, but they have always been vague to me about what Roman chant actually sounded like. What was your second question?
Oh, and how it differs from Anglican chant, like how, or I mean, I think of like the standard chant we sing through Mass, or you find like the sets of the Mass being like the Agnus, the Kyrie, and those things like that, and from that.
Yeah, so there's a large chunk of Anglican chant which is very highly based on the Gregorian chant. So, for example, that gradual that I sang is the gradual that we sing in the Ordinariate during funerals, and that's the same exact notes as the Roman gradual, but just with slight differences, because when you have it in English, you have to shift around things because syllables are a little different. But I guess another great difference is, for example, the gradual, the psalm that we sing after the first reading, we do that in 4-part harmony. So with the Anglican Church, historically they took a lot of these chants and just filled them with even more harmony, which is not a traditional feature of chant, but it's still very beautiful. So I would say that that's a distinct feature of the Anglican patrimony that we include, at least in the gradual, which is traditionally plain chanted just as a melody. Jeremy?
Do we know what the origins of chant are? Is it something that was just made in the Middle Ages, or is it an earlier?
That's a good question. So that issue is disputed. A lot of people, historians claim that it was influenced by Jewish chant, and so they look at more ancient versions of chant, of Jewish chant and even Greek chant, and how those set a precedence for it. So a lot of people say, oh, well, St. Gregory the Great, he was responsible, but a lot of the chants that we hear come from a period right after St. Gregory the Great. So the late Middle Ages is really when there's a blossoming of chant. In the 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, this is where you see the development, and it really is astounding because chant actually is really the foundation of all Western music. We wouldn't have Mozart without chant. Some monk discovered, wow, I can put a line on the page and have that line be a reference point for pitches. So, first they only had one line, then they added another line, and then another line. And so in the West, we really start this development of referring to different pitches by placing them either higher or lower on the staff with these lines. And you get the development out of chant, you get the development of harmonies, like with that drone, for example. They start playing around with that, with oh, what if we have two people sort of chanting at the same time, but with different melodies? And that's really the birth of polyphony, which we also sing frequently at St. Luke's. A little different. That's music where you have several parts, several voices, and they're both, all two or all three or four voices, they're singing different melodies, but those melodies weave into each other harmonically. So they're melodically independent, but harmonically interdependent. And it sounds like a fugue, sort of. A fugue is a kind of polyphony. Another word for polyphony is counterpoint. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I'm happy to take any other questions one-on-one. Thank you all for being here.